This is The Rundown. I'm Hari Srinivasan. I am joined by our science correspondent, Miles O'Brien, who joins us from Tokyo today. He has just finished driving through some of the exclusion zones around the Fukushima nuclear facility. These are areas that are still hot in radiation. He was able to measure some of this radiation thanks to the help of some bloggers through a project called Safecast. So, Miles, tell us a little bit about this project and this trip that you took.
Yeah, I went into the exclusion zone. There's actually two degrees of exclusion zones. There's a mandatory exclusion zone, which is in a 20-kilometer disk around the plant. And then from 20 to 30 kilometers, they have a so-called voluntary exclusion zone, which is completely vacant at this point. And we went into that area. We couldn't get past the police barricades to get into the mandatory exclusion zone. Went with a group called Safecast, which is a grassroots organization here that is attempting to sort of crowdsource data on the radiation contamination from fallout in the wake of the Fukushima Daiichi plant explosion. And the bottom line is here, there's not really a cohesive, concerted effort to come up with a detailed map of where the hotspots are. And this group has taken it upon itself to do just that. Part of the problem is it's almost impossible to get a Geiger counter, a really scientific grade Geiger counter. When the March 11th event happened, supply and demand took hold, and it was almost impossible to get them. So this is a group of people who are in the hacker community, frankly, and they've been trying to put together parts and pieces and create their own Geiger counter devices, and go out into this area, try to come up with a comprehensive map, and try to get some devices in the hands of people who are living in the region. The idea is the more data, the better. The more comprehensive the map, the better. And what you find out is that these arbitrary disks of exclusion zones around these plants in the wake of these events are in fact arbitrary and do not reflect what happens to the fallout. The weather, the rain, all kinds of conditions can create hotspots in one place, far away and even beyond the exclusion zone, and create safe spots that are inside the exclusion zone. So it's important, according to this group is saying, it's important for the data to get out there so people can make their own decisions.
So some of the places you went to, the readings were very, very high, yet there were still police and authorities kind of standing there. And you've written in a blog post, or the folks that you went with, the Safecast folks, wrote in a blog post that they couldn't really convince them to leave.
I was probing the police officers at the checkpoint about this very idea that they were standing there in this area that had very high levels of radiation. And when I say that, not acute radiation exposure, but if you're there for an extended period of time, it's like taking on a chest x-ray every week or so. And this kind of exposure, this low-grade exposure to radiation, we don't know as much about. We know about the acute exposure and what happens in the wake of that. But we know less about what it's like to be in a situation where you're living with cesium at high levels beneath your feet for a long period of time. And these officers, of course, have been posted there since the event. They had masks on. And I said, well, how do you know that you're okay here? And they had a dosimeter on there, and they were hoping, I guess, that would not give them a high reading. But in the end, they said, look, we just have to trust what our superiors say. So there's a certain amount of, obedience to authority here, and that's part of being an officer anywhere, but also part of Japanese culture. But this whole event has shaken some of those foundations of accepting and trusting what authorities are telling you. There are a lot of people out here that we speak with. We ran into one woman on our route into the exclusion zone who says she no longer trusts anything she hears from the authorities because they were late to provide information, and she says the information they have provided is incomplete. And that's why this Safecast group has entered into the void and is trying to give some data to people in a crowdsourced, free and open way, and let the chips fall where they may.
Are the folks in Japan seeing the data that the folks at Safecast are making available to the public, where the radiation is on a map?
Yeah, this is all emerging as we speak, and the maps are being put out there on the web as they are created. And it's interesting, I was in Tokyo for a public meeting that they sent out some information, just kind of tweeted out. And they had a huge turnout with people interested in what they were doing and how they were doing it. There is a real desire here to just understand what's happening. the sense is that TEPCO and the government have not been entirely forthcoming. And there's a fair amount of evidence that that is the case, that they've been slow to release data and reluctant to provide a comprehensive picture for whatever reason. They also got their hands full dealing with a plant that is still leaking radiation. So Safecast has entered into this, kind of niche here of providing data to people who are just thirsty for information. They really don't know what they're dealing with there yet. And this, each time they go out there and take a drive, each time they give a Geiger counter to somebody who lives in that region, there's one more, data set that is out there that provides people a better sense of what the consequences are of this accident.
All right, Miles O'Brien joining us from Tokyo at the moment. You can see his pieces on the NewsHour as well as a special hour on Frontline. Thanks so much for joining us, Miles.
You're welcome, Hari.
This is The Rundown. I'm Hari Srinivasan. Stay with us.